Hey folks, welcome back. My name is Krishna, and in this video we're going to look at some techniques that you can use to create some really interesting looking spaceships. So let's get right into it. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to just pick a color that is not white. So I can start off with a couple of different techniques. I'll show you the first method. You can start off with the lasso tool, and you can create a shape. Now if you hold the Shift key down, you can add to the shape. If you hold the Option or Alt key, you can subtract from the shape. So you can use this method to create a compound shape of your choice. Now, ideally you want to be able to create some visual rhythm. What I mean by that is that this is a very round, smooth surface, but if you were to break that up by subtracting from that shape, in a few areas right here, I think you have a much more interesting shape to work with. So we can fill that in by hitting Option Delete, and then we can deselect. And then from here, we can use this as a starting point. If we wanted to, we can use the lasso tool to further carve out other shape details. For example, if I wanted to, say, make this a little bit smoother, I'll shift to the polygon lasso tool just to give this a hard edge. So we've got some curves and we've got some straights. This makes it a very interesting looking shape. So from this point, what I can do is I can go ahead and drop the opacity of this layer, make a new layer above it, and I can start to think about the form. So this is going to be a side view right here. I can start off by drawing the outline. It's okay if you're not super precise on this. So we've got this interesting looking structure. I can hide that existing shape, and then I can go ahead and create a little dome. I can add some other secondary bits of information, details, like maybe there's like an engine. So I'm just going to repeat these rectangular shapes. And this follows a 70-30% rule that I found from Jake Parker. He was talking about this on his Instagram. The idea of having little pockets of detail to help balance some of the round, smooth shapes. And this gives your drawing more visual rhythm. So by putting these little bits of detail in there, you've got something that makes it a little bit more appealing for the eye. For example, even back here, we could throw in some thrusters. And we can add pipes. I'm just using a combination of various basic volumetric shapes to just add some visual interest. I'm not really worried about so much detail at this particular phase. So I've got something that I can work with. Now, what you can do with this is I'm just going to reduce the size of this so I can show you what the next step is in this process. I'll make a copy. Command J or Control J gives you a copy. And if you hit Control T or Command T to transform, you can right click and choose Warp. Now, you can push and pull your shapes. That's one way of doing things. But what I'd like to show you are some of the built-in warp functions. And most notably, we're going to look at this inflate option right here. What that does is it just gives you a little bit more of an organic looking shape. You can see how it takes that really round shape that I have on the bottom of the spaceship and it kind of makes it look a little bit more it has a little bit more of an angle to it. I think it looks kind of neat. So now we've got a good starting point. Now when you're drawing a spaceship, you're thinking about what the primary shape is. That's the largest shape. And then you've got your secondary shape. In this case, that's the dome. And you've got your smaller tertiary shapes, which are like the little doodads that you have that are present within the spaceship itself. So this gives you I think a pretty decent silhouette to start from. And then from there, you can always draw a little bit of that interior. So here's an interior. You can throw in some other makeshift elements like lights, panels, etc. And you can even put a hint of some type of a chair or something along those lines. So this is one way that you can do it. So let's now take a look and see how we can maybe take this shape and either create a front or a back view. And I'm going to make a back view. So I'll just hit Command J to make a copy of this. I'll hit Command T once again. That's the transform tool. I'll right click and I'll choose perspective. So now I can grab one of the corners on the lower or upper left side, and I can just create something that looks like this. Now, this isn't a real three-dimensional object here, but what I can do is I can use certain parts of this as a framework. So I can use this glass and this front part here. Now, for the back side here, one thing I want to keep in mind is that this is actually going to be in a 2-point perspective. So I've got the glass here. And then this shape that I've got going on here, you're actually going to see that shape repeated down below to give it a more three-dimensional look. You'll still see some of the engine and other elements, but this is a neat way to kind of, make quick work of this process. I've talked about this in the context of drawing cars and other vehicles, but this is also something you can apply elsewhere. And then obviously you'll notice that the thrusters here, I have to redraw those. So what I can do is just draw that in 3 dimensions as well. And then add whatever details. It's not going to be a perfect representation, but it does give you something that looks convincing and or believable. So now I've got this shape right here, and then maybe there are certain little elements that are inside. Perhaps we have I don't know, maybe like a little hidden area where you've got armaments. And what have you. So I can fill that in. Like so. So that's the back view. You can apply the same concept to the front view if you wish. The other thing that you should also keep in mind too is that this fin right here, I need to make a little bit of a correction. This fin will actually be somewhat in the center of this. So you might see something that's a little bit more rounded. I'm adding a little bit more detail here. So your knowledge of perspective is very important. And what I will say that helped me out with this is being able to visualize objects in a 2-point perspective way by thinking about a rectangle, right? I've talked about this concept before where you've got a rectangular object here that's comprised of 2 trapezoidal shapes. That's the mental model that I keep in mind when I'm trying to examine something that's even rounded in a 3-dimensional sense. So I've got something like this, and then the rest are just details. So the other method, since you've watched this far, if you don't want to use the lasso tool, you've got various shape tools here. So I'll start off with the circle tool. I'll make a shape, move it into position, and I'm going to add a compound shape. I'll use the polygon tool. And in the polygon tool, you can choose the number of sides your polygon has. I'm going to choose 6. And these shapes can be moved independently. So maybe what I'll do is I'll just move this like so. I'll hit Command T. And if I want to elongate one of the sides, I'll just hold down the Shift key. You can also use the perspective tool on this to create a very interesting looking structure. So if you want a little bit more mechanical rigidity or a little bit more structure, you can mix and match these shapes. Something that you'll see a lot in design is the use of repeating shapes. That is a very intentional thing. So there we go. We've got a side. Now we can merge all of these 2 together and then make a new layer above that. And I'll just work with this existing shape. So we've got another dome. And again, I don't have to necessarily follow every single line, but I can use it as a starting point, which is something that I always do. This helps me develop concepts that I normally wouldn't come up with if I was just handed a blank sheet of paper. I like these visualization tools because it really does help me develop ideas that are a little bit more unique. So we've got a windshield. And then using our 80 or 70-30% rule, what we can maybe do is show some of the exposed mechanical elements. There might be some pistons, some wires, some cables, other things that will just allow the eye to linger a little bit longer. If you have too much of a simplified shape, then it doesn't look as visually interesting. Something that I noticed as a kid when I was into Star Trek: The Next Generation is the escape pods from the Enterprise are basically milk cartons. That's right, they are milk cartons with two razor blade handles that are on either side, which is pretty neat. They made that look convincing, and it's just basically using a simple shape. So I'll put a thruster over here, and then maybe have some other armaments down below. Again, side view is a great way to work out the silhouette for an object. So now I've got this really neat spaceship. And then what I can do from here, use the transform tool, choose warp, and choose inflate. And now I've got a really cool looking spaceship. So hope you found this tip to be helpful. Let me know what you think about it. And thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.